Welcome to Time Out Coaching with Coach Tony Garbelotto. Today, we welcome a true legend of British and Scottish coaching. Head coach of Falkirk Fury and winner of numerous national championships and coach to some of the very best players that have played in the UK. I'm really pleased to welcome Coach John Bunyan. Coach, good morning.
Morning, how are you? Tony. I'm fine, thank you.
Great to have you on. Let's get straight into it because you've got such an incredible history in this game.
Well, it's quite a few years, Tony, right enough.
So tell me, first how you got involved in the game of basketball, and how that pushed you, into becoming a coach.
Well, no surprise in Scotland, football was what I was involved in initially. 50s, 60s, played football. In fact, we played everything back in these days anyway. Table tennis, swimming, golf, everything. So you really were involved in all sports, not such, how we're a bit more dedicated to one or two sports, which athletically, actually, the more sports we always, our players that come into the club, they could be involved in football, swimming. We certainly don't discourage them. We don't have, there's a bit of a football mentality. Once you're into football, you're in it. You can't play any other sport, But athletic development, some of our best defenders have been football players, fantastic footwork, So, involved there. But when I went to high school, early 60s, that was my first taste of basketball, 2 PE teachers there. Every year at every first year class at Falkirk High School had a basketball team, whether they wanted one or not. So we had like a 6-team league in the first year at our school alone, which was fantastic. That group of players then would represent the school and sort of Scottish competition. And so I played a lot in school, no club stuff at that point in time. 1966, I joined the police, a police cadet. I went to the real world and played a bit in college. We went to college, played there. But then when I joined at 19, the actual police, that was me. I was involved a lot in swimming. I've been involved a lot in swimming also, as well as basketball. Life-saving in particular, life-saving teams. College record holder with another guy at the college, police college, and life-saving pairs. We did all these staged incidents and swam down in Hendon, Tony, the coldest pool I've ever been in, the Metropolitan Police Place in London.
I know it very well. I can't tell you that I know the pool very well, but I know the Hendon Police Training College extremely well because as a young coach, we were very lucky to be invited by mainly Kirk Dawes to
Kirk
play.
Dawes, yes.
Yeah,
I'll come on to all that police basketball. Kirk Dawes, Rob Harper, Kevin Penny, all these guys. Yeah, so that was, and I played a lot of golf. I still do. But I played a bit in the police football team. So basketball kind of dropped out for about 8-9 years. Then another guy, Eddie McKinley, Eddie's a FIBA referee, commissioner. He's on one of the British basketball boards. Eddie and I started the Central Scotland Police basketball team. That would be in just around about when Keith was born, 1977. He'd been married for 5 years. Wife was a teenage bride, as everybody was in these days. And so 1977, Keith was born, and that was when we started the police team. And we had great success into the 80s. That was when Soulright came on the scene with Bobby Kinzer and Terry Mangum. Terry Mangum actually started, he was involved in coaching our police team. We got a couple of guys in. Terry was one of them. So that was it. Yeah. And Mr. T, as he was known, from the A-team. And I have a lot of things that recur in my basketball story because Tony's son, Mikey Mangum, actually played against Johnny in the Scotland-England teams later in competition. So, that's how I got involved in coaching. I went away to the crime squad. I was in a surveillance unit for 3 years, and but I was still playing basketball with the police team. And then when I came back, got involved in sports development, basketball in Falkirk, and was coaching there. And then I became kind of the player coach of the Central Scotland police team, with some great players in the team, a lot of ex-international players. We won 5 Chairman's Cups, which was the sort of local league equivalent.
Sure.
And played in the British police competitions for 80s, 90s. I played right way into my 40s and played against like guys we're talking about, Kirk Dawes, Rob Harper, fantastic player, Kevin Penny. And the police competition was really tough. You know,
really
it was
tough.
Liverpool police. And so I had a tough upbringing as far as playing and started coaching.
Was there anyone at this time that when you said you were starting, you were doing the player coaching? Of course, you know, you're seeing, you know, certain things that are happening on the court. Was there anyone influencing you to like, you know, like, hey, you should do this in these practice sessions? Or were you just, you know, kind of like going along with the flow almost?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been, whether it's golf or whatever, I always been key. I don't bother about spending endless hours on my own practicing, you know, or reading books or looking at film. Or I was probably early analytics. I was always looking for an edge off the court, you know, for our players, particularly, you know, with Keith. We got into Fury was formed around in 1992, but you know, it was clear that the Scots were maybe not the most athletic, but there was nothing to stop us being technically good.
Very good.
And, you know, so I did look at, and it came out of swimming as well. I was involved in a lot of swimming coaching for 10 years, morning training, 5 mornings a week. I was taking training and 5 nights. So you think, when was I able to do police work? But I was in between. You know, the coaching guys like Adrian Moorhouse, I would go to clinics like that. And so I always had a kind of ethos of looking how to improve technique. You know, coach swimming's all about repetitions as well.
Absolutely.
You know, interval training, everything like that. We take the interval.
Were you like, so this obviously, you know, being involved in the police, you know, it's a, you know, disciplined job, coaching swimming, extremely disciplined, like you say, golf, very technical. So you were really learning to, you know, to structure sessions well, you know, or you were concentrating on the techniques, you know, and how did you find the, you know, how to teach some of these techniques? Because you've definitely coached some of the best shooters that have been in our.
I can come on to the shooting techniques, but yeah, I like working with Terry Minecombe. And then as Keith actually went into, you know, at 15, we barely had a team then in 1992. That was our first junior team. We couldn't get into Division 1 because first team in the league, it was born out of school team. And I thought these guys are pretty good. You know, Keith even then could shoot the lights out at 15. So we need to get them into National League. We won that second division, and Keith made the Scotland team. And a year later, I became involved in Scotland international coaching for 13 years up until the Commonwealth Games. So started working with people like John Grant up in Arbroath, Tony Zifris, and, you know, so these guys had been involved a bit more than I had at that time. And, you know, they were good at individual coaching, but I could, you know, and I was starting to, you know, develop my individual coaching, shooting a basketball and the technique. And, you know, I was happy to learn from other people, other players, look at things. And so, but on the practice side, but we've been involved in the CID in particular, the planning, the detail was there. And when you're involved with international teams, you've got to plan, obviously, not just for one game. You're there for maybe 8, 10 games, a whole different ball game. When you're, as you know yourself, Tony, when you're in an international team for a couple of weeks, it's meals and practices and everything, and scouting and analytics. And, you know, these are early kind of analytics days. But
obviously,
so, but no, I looked at a lot of stuff myself, and ultimately, as we developed, I got involved with a guy, Stuart Craig, a golf professional. We worked on, he was, biomechanics was coming in. I used it for free throws, biomechanics, where it was force plates, where we were putting people on the force plates. You could see 90% of their foot pressure was on their left leg. You know, they were basically taking free throws, balancing on one leg. We were filming it at the same time, looking at coach trajectory, the trajectory of the ball. So, you know, it was a great development in shooting a basketball, you know, and I got my own views about.
That's Coach, that's an incredible point, early on, but to even think that, how does that methodology not translated today, where we have such ability to use, technology in such an easy way and cheap way? And you were using it back then. I mean, even for myself, that's the first time I've ever heard someone, talk about the biomechanics of a free throw, which is, something that's one of the most important shots in our game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I brought that into the Scotland men's team as we're preparing for the Commonwealth Games. So players from other clubs became involved in that. And not only that, but dynamic warm-ups as well, Tony, was a thing I got involved with. Guys from the sports development side, and, at that time, when I was in the police team, everybody would run out, they'd run onto the court, lie on the ground and stretch themselves to death, And I was reading articles, and there was a sports magazine, Peak Performance it was called, and that came out, and there was articles about warming up and what you should be doing and how you developed athletic ability, etc. So David Henry, a guy that he actually was a junior coach in Rangers Football Club, and he actually wanted me to go through and show them some basketball drills about, the things that we were doing about passing and movement and balance and transition and offense and defense. And he was giving me this dynamic warm-up stuff, so we moved from stretching ourselves to death to, I remember being out in Africa in Sun City with the Scotland team prior to the Commonwealth Games, and the teams just looked at this dynamic warm-up that we were doing thinking, what are these guys doing, All right, they didn't need to do it, they were jumping out of the gym anyway and dunking on us, but, so it brought an extra, the guys felt prepared, because we were actually working on, we were coming out to start sprinting in the game, we weren't coming out to stretch in the game. So, and of course, everybody uses it now,
Yeah. So from 1992, the early days of Falkirk Fury, talk about that process and how, it was getting better and better, and also maybe talk a little bit about what your early philosophy was as a coach from your own team perspective.
Yeah, well, 1992, that was when we formed Falkirk Fury, and it coincided really with the start of my involvement in Scotland teams, which would be in 93. So we had just had a boys team at that time, which was a junior boys team. But as luck would have it, they actually changed the age groups. It was under 15 and under 17, I think, and we were under 17. They changed it to 16s and 18s. So 90% of my team, except Keith, couldn't play. They were all too old. So we had to move to an under 21 league. So Keith was playing under 21 basketball at 16, which of course is always something that is, a great one for people playing in their own age groups and playing against people. But there's no doubt kids will develop when they're faced with the bigger challenges of playing older brothers or older teams, etc. So we had an under 21 team at that point in time. It might even have been under 23, actually. 4 or 5 years in that. And just as Keith went into the BBL, the Edinburgh Rocks was formed in 98. Our best player, he went there, and the under 23 league got stopped in Scotland because they hadn't enough senior men's teams. So all the under 23 teams, Dunfermline Raids and Mirren ourselves, the Kersley New teams, we were all pushed into the senior men's league. But amazingly, within 2 seasons, we actually won the senior men's title, a great group of players. But at that time, year 2000, we had started another couple of younger age group teams. My daughter was playing, Kim, so we had a girls team. And, we're starting to develop. That was us 3 or 4 teams by that time. And started to get more people on board in terms of coaching within the club. And, so really we were looking to develop not just our players, but the club itself was expanding.
When was the Falkirk professional team in with Kevin Cadle? When was that, and what year?
That was in the 80s, Tony. Yeah,
and,
in the 80s.
Did you have any involvement in that, or were you just around? Were you watching Kevin coach at any times, or
Yeah, I knew the owner of Coasters Arena, a guy Neil Rankin, so I was down at practices and stuff. Kevin actually played in the Central League, the local league, against our police team.
Wow.
He wasn't a bad player, he wasn't great, but and he would have admitted that himself, obviously a fantastic coach. Bobby Kinzer there saying, and Keith was a ball boy at that point in time. Right. But that team, who's their big, we had 5,000 people were at these games when they played Murray from Edinburgh and Alton Bird. And so fantastic games, and people like Derek Pope, he's the most spectacular dunker I've ever seen, genuinely taking off from the free throw line and dunking the ball, So Coasters was a great platform for basketball in the Falkirk area.
Sure.
We had a local league in Falkirk that basically had 3 leagues in it, 30 teams in Falkirk alone at that point in time. And that was all off the back of having a great team like Solright. But Solright fizzled out just into the 90s. A lot of people will blame David Murray for killing Scottish basketball. He ultimately was the owner of Rangers Football Club, but he was big on basketball. But he wanted all the best players in Scotland to be in his team to go into Europe. And Basketball Scotland, rightly at that time, says, no, hold on, you've got your team. We're not sanctioning that this one Scottish team. It might have been, who knows, it might have been a good platform, but Murray themselves had a great team. They were in Europe. They played Real Madrid with Bobby Archibald's father played in that team, so there was a lot of basketball about in the 80s, 90s, but until the Rocks came in 98, it had really, the professional side had kind of slid out,
Sure. So, Keith is obviously now moving, to, like you said, to the Rocks.
Yes.
You're starting to grow Falkirk. Is there any other influences for you at this time? Are you going, a little bit to America to check out anything, or who's influencing you most around this time?
Yeah, well, the roundabout, I suppose, as Johnny's getting older, actually, and on the women's side of basketball as well, actually, there was a team, another local team, Denny Devils. They actually folded, and we inherited 2 or 3 of their teams. So we moved to be one of only 3 teams in Scotland at that point in the early 2000s to have senior men, senior women, junior men, junior women, cadet men, cadet women. There was lots of clubs in Scotland. They might have had a cadet men, under 16 team or under 18. And then our under 14 programs, under 12, and we're having 2 teams in each age group, so the club was really developing. So camps were a big thing, and to be, Basketball Scotland had a great national camp as well that I coached at. There was Americans coming into the camps held at Kinross, so that was a real positive as far as seeing some of the stuff Americans were doing. And then I took Johnny's age group was a fantastic age group. Ali Fraser, Cameron Buchan, his sister Mary Buchan played for us. She went and played for Old Dominion. She was the first Scot to play in an NCAA Division 1 team, played for Great Britain. An amazing player, Mary Buchan. And, so it wasn't just male players, we were developing female players. But as the kids were developing, it was in round about 2009, at the end of that season, we had started going to Flanders. There was an amazing tournament in Ghent, in Flanders, 30 different countries, 120 teams were in that tournament. We went over there as a club. One year I think we took 6 teams over 1 year to Flanders. And, I was looking at all the different styles of coaching, because there was American teams there was fantastic Dutch teams, Belgian teams, and of course they all had their own style of play. You'd speak to the coaches, and the 2009, our junior team, we went over and we won the junior elite A tournament against the top team from Serbia. And these Serbian coaches, they were gobsmacked with these Scottish players, because Johnny was literally the best point guard there.
Yeah.
He could read the game amazingly. Ali Fraser, technically, Cameron Buchan, Mary's brother, great big player. We had a great team. And they were structured, and back in these days, I played quite a lot of sets, I was box offenses, zipper offenses, various things. And Johnny could control all that, so... And we won that title in 2009, which was an amazing achievement. And these Serbian coaches actually got to know them really well. They took that team. They came over and coached in Scotland at our camps.
Wow.
I had Americans come over, but interesting story about the Serbians, the 2 guys that came over. Of course, I'm down watching the sessions as well as taking part in them and organize it. And they're doing the same layup type drill for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And I had to go on the court and say, I think Nemanja was one of the guys. And they, look, we'll have to move on. I know that you do this for 10 hours over in Serbia, but, we have to move on. But they were determined. They weren't moving on until they were getting it right. And that's the ethos, of course,
Of course. And it's a really great point. I try to still, talk about this in this day and age where we talk about, games-based approach and player-led approach. And I say, look, you're still, if you show me the scientific proof that everyone in the world is doing this, I can fully advocate to it. But at this moment, we know that, in certain places in the world who are producing, a very, very high percentage of players at the highest level are doing it in the old school way. So it's not to say that there isn't a new way to do things, and everyone has their own way of doing things. But
and I had experience of that in a very early stage with the Scotland teams. Scotland bizarrely entered a Euro A. I think it was a Euro A competition. It must have been Euro A, because we ended up at the Kelvin Hall with this Scotland team, and anyway, some good kids in it. Not ones that were going to stand out in the future, but we were in our group was Russia and Sweden.
Wow.
And and that was John Grant was the head coach and I was the assistant. And a couple of funny stories from that were at the Kelvin Hall, and the teams are all staying in university dorms, and we're due to play Russia, and the guy from the hall comes, it's going to be a slight delay. And we only found out because they had painted the rings to make it look great. And they knew it was like kids under 18 basketball. And of course, they think, well, nobody's touching these rings. And the Russian players are hanging on the rings, and coming down with paint on their hands. So there was a game delay. There was a game delay on that. So that was all sorted out. But the Russian coach, and the game was just a walkover. But he was subbing. If a player missed a shot, that was his subbing policy. That player was out. If you missed, you were out. And then the Swedish team that we played, who had some fantastic players, John and I later learned that the budget of that Swedish junior team was bigger than the whole of Basketball Scotland's entire budget. Unbelievable. So, it opened my eyes to the level of basketball out there, outside Scotland,
So you did touch on it that you were set offense. What else were you as part of your kind of like the club's DNA? How were you approaching defense? How were you approaching transition? And we'll get on to the shooting in a minute.
Yeah, well, when I started out, it wasn't overly structured in the younger days. But as I read playbooks, I got playbooks that are literally you can hardly read them anymore. About zipper sets and the box offense. We had some great big players. So we're running box, just dribble down the side, the big guy would drop down, the shooter would pop out to the wing, everybody'd run out the shooter, leave an isolation in the post, and a few things running off that. But why change it if you were killing them every play on that? Don't change it until they work out how to beat it.
Yeah.
So sets. We worked a lot of sets, and it was great actually. I really enjoy working with the half-court sets, to be honest. And the players enjoy it when they get a great deal of enjoyment out when it works. It's but we've moved away.
Just before you go on to that philosophy, the rest of the philosophy stuff, I'm trying to get the more experienced coaches to describe a little bit about what you're doing. You're really downplaying how good a coach you are with the technical skills of the players, because that was one thing that everyone sees, with, a lot of Scottish players, but especially the ones that you have coached, that they pass well, they dribble well, they understand the game. And of course the shooting. I mean, what were you doing? Was this a lot of drill repetition in practice? Was that a certain methodology in how you were doing it? Because, you didn't have limitless hours to work with.
Oh no, absolutely not. And I know you were amazed the other week when we were speaking how the coach Sevenoaks was saying he had a couple of hours a week with his players, but that can be a fact in non-pro situations, clubland, that you are limited. You're relying on your players developing themselves off court. You're setting them up as to how to shoot the basketball, how to shoot, catch and shoot off the dribble, stepping into the shot, all these kind of things. And but no, the discipline of potentially players like Kieran Akara and Ali Fraser, Johnny, all these guys that have played for us, Keith over the years, with a lot of fantastic players. And yes, we did work a lot in sets, and potentially that was a discipline side of things. But I think people have got to, you touched on drills and talk more about drills. I think coaches have got to I've seen a lot of coaches, because I'm a tutor as well and became a tutor early on. And I think when you become a tutor and you're coaching coaches, you actually improve your own coaching as well. Definitely. Because you're looking at things you might have forgotten about or new things that come up. But, don't fall into the habit of just dishing out drills. I've seen, people have given presentations as a tutor and they've just served up a drill. They've never said one single thing about it. They've never stopped the practice when there's clearly been something not going right or something good. And that's what I always say to them. We've 20 coaches in the club. To our coaches, don't be frightened to stop the drill and point out or just say stop. Look at the positions on the floor, see where you are offensively, defensively, what's been happening. And so I did a lot of that. I ran a lot of great drills, and we've got great drills, but at the same time, that's not it. You've got the perception on the drills or the plays has got to have meaning to it, that the players understand that they're not just on the floor to run up and down in an 11-man drill or whatever it is. There's a reason for it, that we're playing 3 against 2 in an 11-man drill, and there's a reason about where your position is in tandem defense. And when we early days, when I was never, they used to bring the ball down the middle in a 3v2. And, I pushed the ball onto the wing, because these two guys that were at the basket, they never moved till the ball went to the wing, so get the ball to the wing and get them to adjust. And then you make the extra pass and nobody's guarding your trailing player on the weak side. So, a lot of stuff like that over the years that the players would take on board. At basketball, I've always to the detriment. I'm not slagging football. There'll be a lot of football people listening. You know, I always said, and one kid said it back to me, JB, coach, playing basketball, I've actually got to think, no, like football, I'm just running about, you know. And I've always said that basketball players are really clever people. I can see it with their exam results and everything, you know.
It's interesting you say this, but you know, at the moment I'm doing my masters in elite sports coaching, and you know, I try to downplay it, but at the same time I always stress, you know, look, our sport is so, you know, advanced in coaching and coaching mythology. You know, like we know that in soccer they were never doing these things. You know, they've only just started catching up on some of the sports science and video and analytics that we were doing. Like I said, I had to tell the course the other day, there were basketball coaches in America in the 60s splicing together video 8 to put together, you know, scouting reports. I said, you guys only started using video 10 years ago. I said, it's like a joke. That's crazy. So anyway,
they only started warming up a few years ago as
exactly.
well. I was involved a lot in football, and the team talk was in the dressing room. Then they ran on the pitch at 3 o'clock, you know. But but that's where I learned a lot from swimming, because swimming is probably one of the most advanced in terms of, you know, warm-ups and all the repetitions and the technique and the dedication. And, you know, people moaning to me, oh, I've got to come early or stay late. I said, listen, you want to get in the pool and you'll find out about toughness, you know. The swimming training that I did with a life-saving, I used to come out and was sick at the side of the sessions. You were just pushed in the ground. I'm not advocating that, because I know there's a lot of people go beyond that, but it was just, you know, people never took you beyond that. But there's a level of intensity, shall I say, you know,
Not
you've got to be intense.
Johnny will tell you that I come up with this story at least once a season. And it's normally when the players are moaning that they're training too hard or the schedule's too hard. And I say, listen, you have to understand our sport, okay? Our sport, we train the smallest for the biggest gratification rewards, i.e. our training time is very limited to the actual amount of competition that we play. We could play 2 times a week. And yet someone like swimmers, cross-country skiers, these marathon runners, their training to competition is incredible. It's off the charts, and they're not moaning. And you know, and that's what I try and explain to a basketball player. Don't be complaining. And actually, Messina has just actually put that out, and I sent that out on Facebook, where he really was aggressive in the media to supposable professional players, saying exactly the same. You guys don't know how easy you have it. Do not complain to me about hard coaching. So it's a very important one. So.
No, and maybe you know, hard's maybe the wrong word, Tony. And there's no malice or anything for, you know, anybody you're taking. And at the end of the day, you are watching how they're doing. But you know yourself that in order for people to get to the next level, that's the first part, because I've another belief that you could be the greatest player in the world. You could train all you want, etc., but you've still got to want to do it. And that's the bottom line. I've seen so many players, talented players, and I've had them myself that have gone to the States, and, you know, they've maybe just said, well, it's maybe no for me. At the end of the day, they have to have that final factor of they want to do it. And that next step is a whole different ball game of commitment. You know, our citing Johnny and Ali again, I'll not say this about Keith, they don't drink, but you know, so they took that to almost the next level of dedication. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having a drink, but it just shows you that, you know, there are levels and levels of you've got to really want to do something at the end of the day. And I think I've seen so many great basketball players that ultimately they failed because probably they didn't really want to do it.
No, that's,
you know,
a great point. And is that part of your philosophy has been about competition and trying to find the players that, you know, have that desire to win and to compete. Is that something that you've always thought about?
Yeah, definitely. I think that attitude that I have myself, probably, of being able to just aimlessly hit golf, not aimlessly, because there is a structure to hitting golf balls in the practice range, but, you know, just actually go out and practice. And I did it myself when, you know, the more I actually got into coaching, the better I think I got as a player, because I was, you know, my own shooting, I would look at it, but the things that I was doing myself as a player. And I think it's great when if you can get your younger players into coaching, because it gives, just like the refereeing and all our players, we've got a great group of table officials, so some of them will be involved in refereeing, but they're all supporting each other. One thing about the club, you know, the girls will come along and see the boys and vice versa. Our men's team, we got a great crowd on a Friday night. But another thing about ethos was, and I've been fortunate to have a whole load of players from out West Scotland in my men's team and in the club. You know, we've had players from, the last season's team had players from China, America, Greece, Bulgaria, Lithuania. Bantu was from St. Kitts, and of course a few Scots guys as well.
Sure.
Great Scots players. But you know, these players, the Boris Matrikov, and another guy, Ivan, Bulgarians, you know, tremendous passion and flair. The Greek guys that I've had playing for me, Kostas Pedridis, way back in 2000 when we first won, is a Greek player, comes over to Edinburgh University, Greg Fousas, and Greg played for Panathinaikos as a junior, and Kostas said, "You play for nobody but Mr. Bunyan when you go to Scotland." And so Greg joined us, and, you know, and a French guy I had, Walter Luby, he a fantastic player. So these guys were, along with Big Stuart Mackay, Ronnie Gordon, they were part of a team, with our first treble winning team. And, you know, we did a treble in 2 out of 3 seasons. But these foreign European guys and the Americans we've had, Eric Olsen, who you know, David Foster, last season, Michaela McInnes, you know, the Americans are great with the kids, they're great with the fans. Yeah. They just love an American accent, everybody. But, you know, and they're amazing offensive players. They're decent on defense too. But, you know, the Lithuanian guys that I have, you know, you just wouldn't want to get in the way of these guys. No. Some amazing. So all these nationalities, but one thing, Tony, I was going to say, they've all got respect. They're all very respectful, you know, and that's one thing I would say stands out about these European players. The Americans we've had, you know, they've not just they're structured, and yes, some of them are not as structured as others, but they have a great ethos. And, you know, we look at our defense, we want to be the best defensive team, but we want to entertain, and, you know, we want to go out and, you know, I've always wanted to play fast breaking basketball, trapping. Now, you know, I saw you over in Germany at the Albert Schweitzer tournament twice in the last 5-6 years, and, you know, I was out the coach, I was on the staff of the American team. Yeah, that was through Mike Olsen, and that was because I coached a lot of zone during the time. You know, I'm not a great believer in it, but a believer in zone. It's part of the game, you know. And I always laugh at the people who are so biased at times about man-to-man zone. A lot of rubbish. Well, sorry, it's part of the game. And, you know, you watch them, they go out and they face European zone teams, and they're clueless. Yeah. They've got no idea how to break down a zone. They don't know how to use it themselves because they don't practice it. So our practices and my philosophy over the years has been to include a fair bit of zone as well as a fair bit of man. You know, one title's playing just man-to-man at times, bit of zone, but, you know, the various zones over the years, and people enjoy working and trying to understand the different principles of a 1-3-1 and a 1-2-2 or diamond traps and stuff like that, you know. And we bring it in, and as everybody does on end-line plays or out the blue, or we'll run it until somebody actually finds a way. If, you know, I'm looking at a team that's got no shooters, then why would I not play it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a truthful fact, and most people that know me know the story where I say, in 2010, we had a team, my Everton Tigers team, we started playing zone in February, because we only had 7 fit players in a game in Milton Keynes, and we won by 27. And from that moment on, we played zone every single possession until the second minute to go in the BBL final against actually the Glasgow Rocks and Stirling. Right. And they had made this massive run against us. We switched to man for like for like 2 possessions because we absolutely needed a stop. And it's crazy. And luckily ended up winning that championship. So it is, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't use things, but like every coach, if you have your philosophy and you want to be a man-to-man coach only, then that's it. But I agree with you. I think you should be as flexible as possible, and I think that there's definitely the use of the zone is super important. Going back to just starting winning now with the Fury and building incredible championship winning club. Do you think that the winning started to just every year players wanted to play for you, wanted to win, you just kind of like, this is now the ethos of the club? Or do you just think that you were more concerned about developing really high level players? I mean, just listen to some of those players you're talking about, even the Ronnie Gordons and all of these guys, Ali, and then obviously we can get on to Kieran in a minute. But was it still your focus to produce the players, and it just happened to be that you were winning? Or as a club you wanted to win every time, as we all do, every time you stepped on the floor?
Yeah, I think obviously at the start it was family with Keith, and then, as I say, my daughter Kim, she played, and she's coached as well as still playing and still coaching. She said she's won 5 titles as a coach, and Keith's won about 6 or 7 in the Scottish League. So they've all gone on and coached and developed really well as players and coaches. But so it wasn't that up until 2000, we won that junior league Division 2 when we entered the league. We won that, and then we were in slightly higher age groups. But in 2000 we won. Then we had a spell of while we were really doing well in underage groups. The next senior win was in 2010 with Eric Alston. Johnny and Ali were in the starting 5 along with Keith. That was before they went to the States. And that really was the spark of us senior-wise starting to really pick up, because it was a lot of homegrown players.
Sure.
But then I would say, as we got into the 2000s, we really had quite a number of not additions, but we'd maybe have a Spanish player, or and Edinburgh Kings, and they would maybe have an Australian. So the Scottish clubs themselves were picking up players from the universities as much as anything. It wasn't players coming over specifically to play for you. So yeah, we developed and had a really successful run, and from 2010 to the present day, the last 8 seasons, the men's team alone have won something like 13 titles. 1 year, I still coach the men's team and have, but 1 year was special in that we won the playoffs, and I also won the playoffs with my women's team as well, which was for me amazing, winning with a man's team and a women's team. And I did that at Falkirk High School, because that's where our academy is as well. We had a open boys and open girls team. We won there. So our academy program at Falkirk High School, which was where I went to school, all my kids have gone, a lot of kids have been there. And Caleb, our American player, he coached there at the academy last year. So that's been a really important part of developing. But the development also has come from having, some great players that have gone from our club to the Rocks and come back again. We've had a couple of players like Boris Matrikov, a fantastic player, actually played in the BBL, Bulgaria, I don't know if you coached him, Tony.
I coached him. One of my most favorite players to coach.
Very clever. Thought about the game. He would be, if we'd lost the game, which was rarely with him. He'd be thinking, "Well, sorry, coach, how we did that." And so these guys are bringing a lot to the table, and they're helping develop your younger players. But our own players are developed within the Falkirk Stirling area roundabout, and really the focus is on at practices on developing their individual skill, developing their team ethos. With great ethos for people to be team players. Yeah, you've got to step up if you're potentially the best player in the team, and at times you don't have that player. You've got to play as a team, and everybody plays for each other. But we encourage individual performances as well, and we want our players that are capable of scoring 20, 30 points to do that. But the most satisfying stat probably is when you're coming off and you've got 30 points from your bench, or you've got 7 players in double figures, and nobody's in the, these are the what you're, personally for me are really good situations, rather than the one guy that's maybe got 40 points and everybody else has got nothing. But there are games when that happens,
And what? So, yeah. Talk to me a little bit about, how you go about finding some of these local players. Obviously you're not in like a massive area, like a city like Glasgow or Edinburgh, but you've always, tried to attract, and look for kids. Obviously Kieran is one of these kind of, incredible success stories. I mean, what's the process with regards to that? Or do they just gravitate towards you?
No, in fact, it's a good question. And it's one that I've probably identified over the years, is that Glasgow and Edinburgh, they're massive cities. They've also got several teams, so there's a wee bit of dispersal of players. But in Falkirk, we've got 8 high schools here. We've got Stirling, which is nearby, which has got a few high schools. But so we've potentially had the ability to have a good group of local players. The best players from these high schools will come into our program. We've got a 30 school primary school league in Falkirk. There's 50 primary schools in the Falkirk area. 30 of them play in our primary school league. The Rocks Jump to It program. We've had 20 schools in that program. So we're seeing kids, 8, 9, 10 years of age, and we have sports development. We work in partnership with sports development. So we as a club are very big on partnerships. We're in the junior NBA, which is again a school's primary based program. And so we've been fortunate to have, as they come to the under 12 situation, about 20 boys or 15 girls, and that just builds. I've always looked for, it's actually a bit like the swimming squads we had, always looked to have about 10, 15. If we can get 20 players in an age group, great. Sure. And people have come in when they've been high school age from maybe a roundabout, but I've been very positive to give the kids in our area that chance, and they've grabbed it with both hands. As I say, we've got had a lot of great coaches over the years that have helped in the program. Matt Hoffman and George Connell, Neil Connell, Dave Cooper, my own family, Keith Kim, he's Johnny coached, and a whole, got a lot of young coaches as well. I've got some fantastic girls that actually make amazing coaches. They've got some fantastic girls that are involved at present with our under 12 teams, and they're really they're so prepared and planned, and they speak well, they demonstrate, they give good present, they're not frightened to talk. Some of the coaches, I've come across them, they, no disrespect, they struggle to get it out, to present. And, some of the best coaches really are the teenage girls are amazing.
So that's a good segue to a couple of questions here. First, talking about, basketball in Scotland and coaching in Scotland. I mean, where are we now? Because, you know, historically, you know, it still is, there's been some incredible players that have come through, you know, both domestic, you know, from purely domestic and gone on to such big things with GB and stuff. Where do you think we are now with basketball in Scotland, and specifically coaching, you know, in Scotland?
Yeah, I mean, basketball in Scotland is really good in schools, and I always actually say it's the most played sport in schools, because it potentially is actually in Scotland. It's used in higher PE. The basketball offense is used in their structures, etc. So basketball is a key program in that. Most of the schools, certainly in our area and throughout a lot of most of Scotland, so there's a very good schools cup program and taking place in the background of club stuff. There's a lot of sports development basketball going on. Ourselves and the Rocks and other teams really promote it so kids can see basketball. But as far as the clubs, yeah, I mean, I think we're bringing it down to from 10. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, to 8 teams in our top leagues, which is men's, women's, not the men's, women's, they'll stay 10, but the younger age groups, to kind of tighten up the competition a wee bit, rather than some of the teams at the bottom. Although there's pluses and minuses for that. And
sure,
top teams can run out their players. Bottom teams, they actually do want to play the toughest teams, you know. Sure. So no, the competition in Scotland is good. As far as the Scottish national team, obviously, when Scotland decided they were going to be part of Great Britain, that did have a knock-on effect in terms of our younger age group players. We played and have coached in many Euro Cs with our Scotland men's team, as well as fortunately the Commonwealth Games is saved. In 2006, I was the assistant to Tony Garbelotto in Australia with the Commonwealth Games, and that's a great experience for the players as well, you know. But Scotland at that point, take that example in 2006, Tony, we couldn't get Robert Archibald. Nobody could pay his insurance. So he actually never played for Scotland as a senior man's player at all.
Unbelievable.
We couldn't get Kieran because he was redshirted. He was injured that season at Duquesne, so he couldn't go to Australia, which was great that in 2018 he did manage to go, obviously. Ronnie Gordon, as you said, Ronnie was originally from Kings in Edinburgh, and he came and won some titles with us, and he obviously played with the Rocks and played for Fury, but he was in Italy at that time, and with contract issues, so Ronnie didn't go to Australia. Stuart Mackay, who played for Thames Valley Tigers, and played for Fury in our title teams as well. Big Stuart, great player. So Stuart was the only big man we had. And Tony Garbelotto's son couldn't go. Ross, he was the starting point guard. So, but we had a decent team. We really challenged Nigeria. We ended up against Australia, but that was a great experience for everybody. And so I'm glad that the Commonwealth Games side of things has not been an issue, but there is an issue about getting a Scotland men's team together. As you know, there's nothing happening at the moment, so that's not great. Well, there's nothing happening anywhere at the moment, but in normal times there wasn't. So, and the under 16 and under 18s, they were able to play a wee bit of Euro C for a while, but of course they're now also under the umbrella of Great Britain basketball. Yeah. Now, you know, for me, I think the Scots players do stack up quite well. Do they fit into positionless basketball? Well, maybe they don't. You know, because they're not all 6'8" and can dunk and run, and you know, so we've got to watch that. You know, I'm not criticising positionless basketball because I look at it myself and switching on every play, etc., if we can. But at the end of the day, you've got to not be too careful. Some of these coaches, you know, do they actually know what a good point guard or a centre is, or the benefits? You know, I just wonder at times. And the Great Britain, there's a lot of younger coaches out there, but at times, so Scotland, I hope we're still able to keep our identity in all the age groups, because you've got to have
Absolutely
goals. Yeah,
yes.
You've got to have
Yes.
goals. And, you know, is it realistic for every Scottish player to say they're going to be in a Great Britain team? Well, no, it's not realistic. Is it realistic that you have a really good chance of getting into a Scottish team? Well, yes, it is.
Yeah.
You know, if you're really dedicated and you're and you're a decent player, you can, and there's lots of good things at the Scottish teams. There's tournaments abroad, take them to the States, the camps, whatever, to develop them as players. So it's a bit of a still in transition as to the international side of Scottish basketball. And, you know, it still needs a lot of looking at, in my opinion.
Right. That's an interesting point. But at the same stage, I mean, well, you know, I know that I had this conversation with Craig Nichol and even yourself a couple of times about, you know, the exodus of the best Scottish young players to the England academies, because
Myerscough or wherever,
Myerscough or Barking Abbey, you know, or there's no question, you know, that, I mean, those top 4 or 5 academies in England are in an arms race, and if there's a super talent in Scotland, of which there have been, they're definitely going to be finding them and working with them. I mean, is it realistic in the future to believe that there should be some sort of central academy for Scotland basketball? Or do you think that the way the education is set up in Scotland, it just precludes that?
It's difficult, because at the end of the day, the best players have got to play against the best players, and it's, you know, you're potentially hindering the development of a really good player if week in, week out, he's not being faced with a challenge. Of course, he can be, and you know, and I just cited. Obviously, I've got to cite my own experiences. Johnny and Ali, you know, they were in the starting 5 of the men's team when we won that, when they were 17, 16, 17. So, you know, there is a platform, but it is great when they're playing against people in their own age group. And yes, an academy's full time. They're getting a lot of individual tuition. They're getting off-court stuff. They're getting a lot of development as well. They're getting the opportunity to play. I know that they play teams abroad. And, you know, we tried, obviously, we replicate that with taking our club abroad, you know, and playing competitions. Sure. And, you know, we played Redden Rockets when we were over in Flanders. So there is a lot of clubs out there that will, I'm not saying resent that academy thing, but they'll look at ways of doing it themselves. Sure. And there are ways you can, you know, get players to camps, and, you know, there are options, but it's very difficult in Scotland, potentially, for us to have one academy because of the, you know, the education situation. You know, you're going to have to get accommodation if it's going to be worthwhile. They're going to have to be together and get them into an education situation, and then get them playing in a league together. I'm not saying, and obviously the Rocks, and that's actually, I could make a point about that. One of the things I'm quite proud, might be the word, that when Johnny came back, he went to the States to prep school for a year, came back, signed with the Rocks, and the regulations prior to him coming back were that the players in the Rocks team, no matter what age they were, could not play in the Scottish Senior Men's League. So there was this bar on anybody. I think it was 17 or something. Was the age group that, yeah, you could play if you're 17, you still play for your Scottish team. But if you're in that Rocks team and you're sitting on the bench and, I know you're not playing, you're not getting any minutes, you're getting 0 minutes. So our club, we proposed that rule changed to under 23. So when Johnny came back from the States, he played for us for 4 seasons, won 6 titles, and, you know, he was getting 30 minutes of game time every week, playing at a reasonably high level because he was still young, he was still in the Senior Men's League, and he was still going out and getting time with the Rocks. So that was an important change for me, and the Rocks have got young guys in their team just now, and they have over the years. So it happens with the Scotland WBBL team, although there's 2 or 3 things maybe I'm don't agree with about just how young they've gone with that team, but and some of them don't play for their Scottish League team. So there's got to be a balance. And yes, the Rocks could be an outlet. You know, we've played in the BBL Trophy as the Scottish champions.
Yeah.
You know, we it's not beyond. It would be great if there was another team in Scotland that was playing in the BBL, and I think if there was another team that was out there in that younger age group, half a dozen of the young guys they're still playing in Scottish teams, they're still getting development, whether they go to camps or, you know, getting professional instruction every day with the BBL team they're in. And that's a great platform. And these are potential GB players if they're getting daily coaching in terms like that. They don't need to go abroad. But, you know, Ali went to the States, Ali Fraser, Kieran went. We've had Mary Buchan went to the States. So, you know, the American scenario of going to college is good, and there's a few players in Europe. But again, Tony, to me, it's a bit haphazard. It's who you know. You know, I've been fortunate. I've known a lot of people in the States and in Europe, so you can make these connections. I said recently to Basketball Scotland, there needs to be a structure for people to develop. They need to know what the pathway is when they're 10, 11 and 12.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they need where they're going to go. Otherwise, clubs, you know, like us, we've got to just do the best we can ourselves.
Not too much of a political question. This is not a political question, not even a federation question.
I don't mind, Tony. No. I'm not known for not saying what I think, you know. Can Edinburgh
potentially have a BBL team as well as Glasgow? I'm pretty certain those cities are big enough, you know, with reasonable amount of distance between them, or not? Am I mistaken that? Would it need to be somewhere else?
We'd love to have one in Falkirk. The problem with and you know, we've had American players over. We've got lots of European players. The problem is facilities. That's the big thing. And the Rocks have got an amazing facility at the Emirates. I know they're thinking about potentially trying to develop their own facility, because we see some great BBL facilities down in England. And, you know, Meadowbank, which was a big sports centre in Edinburgh, it's basically no longer in existence. So the Edinburgh team, you know, they play out high school. And facilities is the big thing. And, you know, you've got to be able to have, let's say, a couple of thousand spectators in there, and that, because that's one of the key ways to generate money as well as sponsorship.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
So Edinburgh, there's no reason they couldn't, but like everywhere else, facilities is the big thing first. Okay. Yeah.
Moving just slightly different. So it's roughly what we've been talking about, but what about the coaching fraternity? You know, first in Scotland, but also in the UK as well. You have been a person that's connected, you know, yourself with so many people, and you mentioned, you know, people like John Grant, who I met, you know, I don't know, 20 years ago, just, you know, around, and was able to take, you know, and to develop a relationship with him. What do you think, that there is a good, strong fraternity? Do you think people are really working for each other, or do you think it can be better?
Well, the likes of John Grant. John did a lot. You know, he brought Skip Prosser over from when Skip was the coach at Wake Forest. He came over, did some clinics, camp. So, you know, he was really proactive. John himself coached at the 5-star camp, so in the States, a famous camp, and you know, so he did a lot for the game, and I really enjoyed being involved with him in the Scotland stuff. Tony as well, the years we were involved, Tony Zifris. So, you know, Tom Campbell at Troon. There's a lot of guys that have been in it for a long time, and a lot of them been involved in it because of their kids. You know, Tony had his son was a fantastic player. Tom Campbell had all his kids, you know, all my kids. So a lot of people get into coaching through their kids then. But it's probably changed a wee bit now, and there's well, everybody's a bit younger than me, Tony, but there is a lot more younger coaches, and that's great to see. You know, enthusiasm, We Basketball Scotland regularly held clinics. Sometimes they were good, sometimes not so good. I remember somebody coming over, I couldn't speak English, you know, so that was a bit of a disaster. I don't think that had been found out. But so there's a genuine effort to improve our coaches. You know, we've got a lot of good people working the tutor side, the coach development side of things. So coaching's not ignored. It's probably going back a few years. Tony and I, as part of a coaching grant, we went over and we travelled with Kieran's team in Duquesne. We went to high school games, you know, so that we went to an NBA game, which is the worst game of the lot. High school games were the best games, you know. They've still got about 10 assistants and they're in high school, you know. There was more assistants than players. And obviously went to Kieran's games with Duquesne and saw the college program, etc. His coach stayed in a whole upstairs suite at a hotel while we were down in the bottom basement. But that was one side of college basketball. But
sure.
And you know, like say that Albert Schweitzer tournament when I was in Germany with the American coaches, and we met a whole load of coaches after the game, and that's when you learn a wee bit more and you'll pick away at things that are going on. I mean, that tournament was amazing in Germany. I've been there twice with the American team, and Germany, you know, they won it. We were in the final 4-1 year.
Who's the head coach of that team? Was that Don?
Mike Olsen.
Yeah.
Mike Olsen was the head coach. That because you're talking, they've got that was the under-18 team,
right? Okay.
So the Albert Schweitzer tournament, as you know, is the unofficial world championship for under-18 basketball. Correct. You know, we played China and Japan. Where on earth was I ever going to be playing against China and Japan? You know, so that was fantastic. I mean, the German team that won it was just amazing. Some of these players.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was so. Yeah,
actually, I think he played against Dennis Schroeder in that last one. I'm pretty certain he was playing. Right.
I was looking back at some of the players that we played against, and certainly, and some of the
I'm pretty certain that on that team, if I'm not mistaken, Dennis Schroeder and Daniel Tice, who are both in the NBA now, were playing. I'm pretty certain.
Daniel Tice was. You're right.
Daniel Tice. Yeah.
Right. And there's a guy, Ethan Hart, played for us. He was a fantastic college player, played for the Badgers, and don't think he made it to the NBA. But, you know, that was a great experience. So, you know, I think maybe people have got to go out and do their own things. They can't just sit back and rely on the governing body. The governing body in Scotland, you know, they've done a reasonable amount in terms of coaching.
Sure.
But and it is difficult. At the end of the day, you know, a lot of the coaches in Scotland are basically volunteers. You know, they're not like me, who did my 35 years in the police, retired, and can look at it full time. You know, almost.
Yeah. So just saying that point, do you think that point gets over to young coaches? Because it's a semi-criticism of young coaches is that now, with the use of technology, you know, YouTube and Zoom and all of these, you know, the things you can do on your computer, you basically could get anything. I mean, I think even if you Google now, you can get Barcelona's playbook and an NBA playbook. You can see drills, you can see tactics. Do you think that that's making some younger coaches a little bit, in some words, lazy and not wanting to go and get real life experiences like you're saying? Because I certainly feel that they don't go and try to take the opportunity. Like, you know, if you're in the Midlands, for argument's sake, why would you not go and see Rob Paternostre coach, you know, from the BBL? Or, you know, if you're around Manchester and the England women's coach is there, Chem, the Spanish guy, why would you not go and see his sessions? I find it that, you know, at this moment, we're probably starting to get to that stage where we're too technical, you know, reliant on technology.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I'm a champion of analytics, or always looking for an edge off court, etc., etc. But one thing I do feel is that there are 3 different types of coaches, and it's very rarely you'll get one who can develop an individual and coach a game. You'll get some game coaches
very much,
but potentially don't know anything about coaching an individual, and you'll get coaches that can coach individuals, put them in a game, and they're clueless. And I look back in my experiences in the police and making decisions and planning, etc. And that's one thing I've always felt, that you've got to get the feel for being a game coach. And and I've always said a basketball coach is the most active and impactful coach in any sport, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Because they're the guys that we're like a computer. You're a human computer on the side. You're looking at the personal fouls, the team fouls, the timeouts, the offense, the defense, the players that are subbing in. I mean, there's a whole quantum of things you have to go over in your mind in terms of, who are the guys. And, I've seen coaches and thought, do they not realise this guy's still on the bench down there? Coaches that have never bringing players into the game. So It's a very complex business, especially when anybody can coach. And I'm not going to slag man-to-man too much here. Anybody can sit and run a half-court man-to-man defence the whole game and run a couple of offences for it and run 2 or 3 subs in. For me, it's more enjoyable for me, the fans, the players, when you're actually evaluating a whole lot of things and trying to make some changes, whether it's a zone, it's a trap or whatever, or getting different guys in on the matchups, or going guard orientated or whatever. There's a whole raft of things that a basketball coach can do that is just not possible in many, many sports. It's all got to be done beforehand, and it's down to the athlete. And Keith slags me sometimes for saying, too much about coaching, it's the players. Of course it's about the players. Sure. Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. But let's not take away the guy in the sideline.
You're absolutely right. I again make this point, and it's not been demeaning other sports that where the coach does all of the preparation and then the athlete actually does the execution, or in some ways like rugby for sure, it's a very that the coach doesn't have that much to to change, but we can change everything on the fly. We can make substitutions multiple on the fly. We can change an offense, a defense in the flow of the game. And
absolutely,
we also understand emotion and tiredness because we're so close to the action. These are all factors that we are as close to the play as any sports coach is, and we're the ones that can affect winning and losing, versus, like you say, of course ultimately a player has to score or make a stop. Mm-hmm. We all understand that, but we definitely can, and as we both know, more than anything, when teams win, it's the players, and when teams lose, it's the coach. So you fully understand that.
Yeah, I've always, and I get slated for it. And I say it to Keith or Johnny or whoever. If it's a tight game and we've won, for me, it's been the coach. I'm maybe winding them up there, but no, and it a lot's to do with preparation, Tony. Absolutely. At the end of the day, you've got to prepare. You've got to know who you're coming in to play against, their strengths, weaknesses, etc. So preparation is absolutely key, and that's what makes it all the more, the practice is all the more enjoyable as well, knowing, and for the players too. And the players, in my experience, whether they're 10, 12, 14, 24, whatever, 34, male, female, and I've been in a fortunate position to have coached men's and women's teams, and I coach them very much along the same. I won't coach each player exactly the same, because in the men's team or the women's teams, yourself, the way you say something to one player sometimes doesn't go down too well, but you can say it to another player. That's the spark that they're looking for. They want you to be maybe a bit near the bone, whereas with some other players, you go in a slightly different way. Well, you'll talk to the team in generally in a way that's similar. But and you're talking about the preparation. That coach, and I was trying to think of his name, Malkovich was. I took Kieran out to Malaga.
Oh, Okay.
Yeah. First of all, we went to Paris. He was looked at in Paris, and I took him out to Paris. And a funny story there: we were traveling into Paris in the train. It was like an underground train system, and there was nobody was in the barriers initially at this where we were staying. We had to climb the barriers on, and we're on the platform, and we're walking in the kind of underground bit of the train, and the wall opened up, and these guys come out and pull Kieran and I in, and this is the equivalent of the British Transport Police.
Wow.
Fortunately, I had my warrant card with me. I says, look, honestly, there was nobody on that barrier, and Kieran was petrified that that's what had happened to us.
Right.
But no, and we went out to Malaga where he tried out, and he was all set to sign ACB team, top 4. And Malkovich, who was, quite a frightening coach, Serbian coach.
We're talking about, the Pesic and Abramovich, Malkovich was on a different world to those guys. He is one of the all-time hard-nosed guys. Yes. I didn't actually coach against him. I coached against Pesic and stuff. But boy, I've heard the stories, and that guy was absolutely crazy.
Well, I went to the training sessions. We were staying in this 5-star hotel in Malaga, and this was Kieran. I was officially getting him into the system, and I went along to the practices. And he never they had about massive program. There was a strength and conditioning coach, there was a shooting coach, there was 4 or 5 people. And he's actually the same age as me, this guy. And he would be about 50 odd at the time. And he walked in and with, presume his girlfriend, who was about 20 or something, and the two of them sat down, and he dishing out 2 or 3 orders, has a look about, then he goes back out again. That was him,
Yeah, crazy.
But yes, I gather he had a fearsome reputation with the players.
Huge fearsome.
So Kieran got a bit homesick there, and he came back, and the rest history. Went down to England for a bit, and for half a season, and then he went over to Duquesne, where then he played in the ACB himself after that. So fantastic.
Yeah. 3 quick questions to finish with. Favorite basketball drill? You said that you're not concerned about it, but do you have a favorite drill?
Oh, I've got plenty of favorite drills, Tony. Yes, I mean, I'm very much so. Commonwealth Games in Australia, I was talking to the Australian coach. He went out and coached in the and I've forgotten his name. He went out and coached in the NBA, and I was talking to him at lunch in the village over. I said, and we had played them, and they had beaten us by about 40. And it says, "Oh, your team's fantastic, moving the ball." And it says, talked about practices. Yeah, I had only 9 players at practice. He says, but that's a great practice. He says you can use it 5v4, 5 players. And I'd been gobsmacked how every shot they took, there was never anybody near the guy that was shooting the ball. The extra pass was just finding somebody. Ball movement was so quick. Extra pass. He says 5v4, the team with 5, make sure they get that extra pass in. Team with 4, they're working extra hard on defense. So I'll run that when I've got 9 players. I'm quite happy with my 9 players running that one.
Awesome.
The 10 passing drill done in a half court below the 3-point line. Your two teams normally run it 4v4, and the team's got to make 10 passes when they're on offense. They can't pass back to the same player. But what it does teach is off the ball screening, movement, and when someone's trapped with a ball, pivoting and or moving to the ball, the L cut and the V cut. So it's a great drill for both defense and offensive skills.
Love it.
And I really love a lot of advantage, disadvantage transition drills. We run a lot of numerical drills where there's advantage, disadvantage. So drills, yes, but it's not just a case of me throwing it out, sitting back and you've got to be on top of it and get the learning lessons while we're doing it, you know.
Absolutely. Like you say, just even on that simple drill you were discussing about the 10 pass drill. I mean,
Yes.
you know, I see so many times players catching the ball and they're pivoting backwards and they're pivoting away from the basket. And, you know, I see coaches just let that happen. I'm like,
well,
hey.
It's as though their feet are nailed to the floor, as I say, Tony, you know, and pivoting is one of the most underrated things that are coached in basketball. Absolutely. You know, and that little drill, the 10 passes, we'll move it to 6, and then they can actually score and pass 7, 8, 9, and 10, which is great. They're allowed a layup or a shot, an open shot. So drills that have progressions are always great as well.
Great. Favorite all-time basketball coach?
Well, I saw that question, and probably has to be Phil Jackson. Yeah, because I grew up. The Bulls were with Jordan, and I wasn't a kid when I was growing up with the Bulls, but it was more or less when I was involved in coaching at the start, you know, and Tex Winter's triangle offense, and I had a look at that. My God, I decided that no, we didn't have a year to get the learn to the players, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great
so stuff. I always liked the way he coached, and all right, he was maybe a bit arrogant and aloof, but he certainly got results.
Great. And then lastly, favorite go-to saying or statement, something you say.
Yeah, plenty of these, Tony, and probably I'll get folk will know. Basketball's a game of runs is one of my favourite that I hear commented on. And it is, and people have, you know, will say that during a time or something, you know, teams will go on runs, you know, and it can motivate, you know. So spacing and balance is another one I'm great about. You know, setting up how bad, you know, I stop them when there's 10 people standing in one spot, you know, and defensive balance is another thing I'm big on, you know, the guard who's passed the ball cut and nobody else decides to come up to the top when we lose the ball to stop the fast break. So defensive balance and spacing and balance are two of the things I'm always banging on about.
Right. Coach, listen, it's been awesome to speak. You know, I mean, there's so many. I mean, I know you've got so many stories that we could go on for forever. But you know, I really appreciate you being on, and you know, especially what you've done. You know, not just like I say for Scottish, but also British basketball. It's been fantastic, and I know the club will continue to grow, and hopefully, you know, after this pandemic, you can be back playing at least in the BBL trophy. And I hope that everyone's...
Tony, I would like to add that, you know, a great club depends on, you know, the players and the parents. And, you know, we've really been lucky. Fantastic players, fantastic parents. And, you know, there's so many coaches, Pete Duncan and Jen McLaren. I didn't mention them. You know, Pete went away and he's been involved in Scotland stuff. Jen as well. But the coaches as well that come up through the club. So awesome. It's, you know, there's so many parts to it. And the fact that, you know, I think when you've got a good club, it just develops outwards, international and beyond, and just in life in general. You know, these kids are all in it, and it's not just about the best players. For me, I get as much satisfaction when somebody says hello and I'm half thinking who they are and they've played for me, but you know, and they've gone on this, you know, they make a success in their life.
It's great. I really appreciate it. Thank you very, very much indeed.